So, welcome to another episode. So, today we have Dr. Marta Lopez, who is a clinical psychologist. So, welcome to today's episode, Martha.
Hello, Jivan. It's Marta. It is Marta, yes.
Perfect.
The first one was right.
Yeah, I mean it's always difficult, isn't it, with pronunciation of names
Yes.
that you're not used to saying. So yeah. Well, we got there in the end, I suppose.
Yeah. We did, yes, the same. Yeah. And Jivan, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to today.
Same. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as sort of children, when we hear the word psychologist, we seem to perceive it as some sort of mind reader that can manipulate everything. And then as you study psychology or grow up, you realise it's a lot more about the human psyche and understanding sort of patterns and how people think the way they think. And it all starts at childhood, which is sort of leading me to my sort of first question is, from a child's perspective, a psychological perspective, how does that attachment that you form with your peers, your family, your friends, affect the future trajectory of your life? Because obviously, if you have and you see it throughout the world, don't you? People who've had a
Yeah.
bad childhood tend to have psychological issues throughout their life. So how does that work exactly?
Well, yes, to say that, yes, I had the same thought when I was a child. Being a psychologist, you can read the mind. After many, many, many years of studying, I can not read minds. I can only read the narrative. So yes, that is very interesting. In terms of attachment, that is the essential for us to become the person that the people that we become in adulthood, and it's really important, especially the first attachments that we have, being that our parents or grandparents and people or foster parents or uncles or aunties. That is really important. We Attachment is form, and I mean, we need to, I think we need to really get away from that perfection. There is no perfect parenting. There is always something that, well, in adulthood, we realize that it might have become a pattern. And so, but that is not the fault of anyone. It's simply that is something that perhaps we need to work the neural pathways just form in a certain way, and we need to, perhaps we want to work on something to do to be something, get to a goal in our lives, like for instance, well, wanting to be an astronaut, but not having, perhaps thinking that our attention, our power of concentration is not very good, or feeling that our relationships are not working out the way that we wanted. And so initially, the way that our needs are met very, very early on is so important. Because, I mean, I usually give that example of children in the park playing with parents or the mother or the father, and one child falling, for instance, right? Falling, and perhaps the mother or the father or whoever is there may come and console them, and just say, well, it's terrible, it's bad what's happened, it's okay, you can cry, everything is going to be okay. And then when they're ready, they go and carry on playing. And then you have other type of parenting where perhaps the mother or whoever is there, they might not attend to the child needs. So the child falls and no one soothes them. So they might learn to not soothe themselves when they are adults, right? And that can become a big issue, because if we're not sure how to emotionally regulate, if we cannot soothe ourselves, it becomes very difficult to go about life, because life can bring a whole lot of issues. So yes, attachment is very important, the way that our needs are responded to. So attachment is basically a way of meeting our needs when we are in danger. So danger, survival is the core of attachment. We've all seen the ducklings following mom. So if they don't follow mom, they don't survive, right? So at the level of humans, is all mammals have that attachment. We probably are a bit more complex, as we are one of the mammals, the species that are really stay longer within the attachment circle, the initial attachment circle. But yes, most all mammals have that sort of attachment need in order to survive once they're born.
It's an interesting one, that example you use about the swing, because it could play out a number of ways, couldn't it? From what the way I'm looking at it, and
Yeah.
obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but the first is obviously the parent comes over and does a great job of comforting them, which can show that they're loved. Have the self-esteem might grow in terms of they are being looked after, they feel valuable and worthwhile. But on the flip side, what if they weren't to be looked after? For me, there's sort of two branches that could create. One is that the self-esteem drops
Yeah.
because they're not being looked after, that they're not worth anything, they're invaluable, which can lead to obviously self-sabotage and low self-esteem and all of that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it could lead to self-reliance, possibly, that actually no one is here to save me and make me feel better. I then have to deal with these scars on my own. I have to deal with issues in my life on my own. So could that be a case that, I mean, there might be many more options, but determining how the child perceives at that age based on where they are consciously could affect a longer term trajectory of their personality. For example, if they feel that they are self-reliant, maybe they become more independent. The lone wolf maybe do disregard relationships to an extent, or as you said, if they have got great relationships, maybe they're always extrovert, they're always looking for friendship and commonalities. So do you think that even from that young age that can extrapolate out to long-term personalities? And if so, if there's a negative there at a young age, that you hear about it all the time, don't you? Trauma that I had when I was young
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
still with me 40 years later. How do we go about changing that narrative in order to sort of become, let's say, for example, Jeevan 2.0 rather than Jeevan 1, and become that next branch off so that we can start sort of empowering ourselves to a better future?
Yes, that is yeah, very important point. I would say that definitely there are more than just that. Those two examples, obviously, I gave two examples in terms of the swing situation. But yes, there are that starts forming what we understand later to be the world around us. And of course, is depending on the environment, because if the environment in which we live is one that invites that kind of strategy, i.e., to be self reliant, independent, that would be helpful in a way. And that person may be well adjusted in that space. However, perhaps if we think about societies where community is very important, where we build, where we are part, or just one piece of the puzzle, and everyone seems to have a clear role assigned, that can become very isolating for that person, or feel that it does, or feel that there is no, I'm not fitting here. I kind of this group view of the world is not mine. So it depends on the environment, and also at the point of that particular instance. Let's say back in the swing in the swing example, it is the attunement between the person, the adult, and the child. How attuned? What are the needs of that child at that moment? Because there is the mismatch. So in terms of trauma, as you were saying, it's not so much the traumatic experience that we might go through as view culturally speaking, but how it's dealt with. What is it that we need at that point? Maybe child A needs to be left alone to realize that he or she, or whatever, has the power to get up and carry on. That might be a way of later on deal with life. Whilst others don't need that. Others need a little bit more of understanding. So what do I do when I fail in life, when I fall? How do I get up? Do I need others next to me? So is attunement. So the little person can realize what is it that their internal world is asking them, is asking of them, what is it that I need, rather than what is prescribed by external, i.e., parents, which is what we learn. We come to this world with all we need in a way. We just cannot survive without the help of others. But the internal world, we understand it in a way, not cognitive, but emotionally. So if a child is in pain, usually he cries, right? But through the process of bringing that, of nurturing, that might change, and crying may not be the thing to do because crying doesn't take me to get my need resolved. So it's much more intricate than that. Kind of it depends on the attunement and how the adult or the attachment figure is trying to connect with a child to understand themselves and to the environment in which then we are brought up or become adults. So that those are two of the factors that are important. Once we are adults, or we go through the transitional, so difficult of the first transition in our life, where we developmentally separate from our families, from our parents, and become and start becoming ourselves, then at that point is where those tools will serve us best to help us deal with whatever situation comes our way, whether it's a happy one or a traumatic one or something in between, a relationship not working well, being able to say, okay, so what is happening here? Some people, depending on where they used to, they might relinquish their own needs for their partner's needs, and that's something that perhaps they've learned in childhood in that instance that we said. So if no one is listening to us, then we might get what we need by listening to others. But in a relationship in adulthood, that can bring lots of difficulties. Does that kind of...
It does, and thing is, with these sorts of scenarios, do you think it's dangerous to actually? I don't know if this is a sort of manipulative way to ask this question, but is there potentially a way that you can create these situations purposefully to try and change someone? So let's say, for example, you had a child that's overly reliant on you, so overly attached, whereby it's unhealthy. Could there be a way that you actually create the situation? I'm not saying push the kid off the swing, by the way. I'm just using a hypothetical example.
Of course,
for anyone listening. You create a situation whereby they have to use self-reliance, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in respect of they generate positive emotions by doing that, which then can be the catalyst for future self-reliance. Does that make sense?
yeah, yes, I think so. Yes, I mean, you touched on another point in terms of strategies of attachment, of the way that when we say attachment, we view almost that, well, we are attached to someone else. These are strategies to survive, as I was saying earlier, and then later on to hopefully thrive, as many of us live in a world that survival is not the first. We don't live in a war. We don't need to survive straight away. But yes, there is the key, I suppose, is flexibility, harmony, balance. The idea to be able to use the wide range of strategies that they may be in when it's needed. So sometimes it may be needed to be self-reliant because there is no one else. But when there is someone else, to be able to access that. And of course, my dogs are barking. I hope that doesn't disturb
Yeah, I
you.
don't think I can hear it anyway, so which is fine. But yeah,
So,
I mean, dogs and humans, pack animals and all of that. It's I think that's where sport's very good because you have individual sports where you understand it's all on you. You can't then turn, to say, oh well, it's your fault you didn't, defend properly. It's not. It's your fault you didn't, score that goal. It's your fault you didn't save that penalty. Whereas obviously in team sports, it's a collective. You see the team sort of morality. You see the team gel. You see sacrifice between players, like you do this and I'll do this. And this sort of leads me on to sort of part of the same process, really, of not attachment but the identity. Does where you sit within a hierarchy determine your identity? So, for example, if you're the least looked after child in the family, or you're the lowest in an organisation, so instead of being the CEO, you're, let's say, a cleaner or a secretary or whatever. And again, I'm not, demonizing them as roles. I'm just saying from a hierarchy perspective, they are seen as the highest income jobs, and they're not, unfortunately. Is there a case that extrapolates to how you view yourself from an identity perspective as well? So whether it is how you're treated as a child, whether it is, where you fit in the hierarchy, whether it is your earnings, whether it is, how many of the other sex you have managed to have relationships with, all of these sorts of things that affect your self-image, and therefore how successful you're likely to be in the future.
It's a very good question. There is something about a status in what you are talking about, and we know that status is underspoken, underrepresented, and it's very important in how, especially in this complex society that we live in, but in most societies, it's something that it is important. In terms of attachment, it's not necessarily a kind of a direct correlation there. So you might have a job, or someone might have a job that is not particularly high in the rank of professions, if you like. However, it might be held by a person that is, if you like, balanced in terms of attachment, and may decide that this is the best way they want to live, because they might then have a job that they can go home and stay with the family, and or have a simpler life, less responsibilities, or whatever the values. So we're then talking about values, and it is not a direct correlation. However, it can happen, of course, that there are differences. Because we then go to our own thoughts, and what we hear, what we heard earlier in life might be a kind of an old script that it plays under underneath our decision making without much realization. So awareness is very important. So it depends on the level of awareness in which we make the decisions, and about our professional lives, which in the Western world has become very, very important, right? It's very important to live a life where, well, we have the right job, we have the right house, we have the right partner, we have the right cars, and 2.5 children. So kind of there's much more of a standard that is not necessarily, if we can look beyond that, it's not what necessarily makes us happy, right?
I like that, because what you said there is that people put more or less focus on certain things. So for some reason in societies, or today's society, it's the more successful you are in terms of money, status, seem that it's correlated to happiness. But that's not always the case, because as you said, it might be that your primary objective is to spend more time with the kids, in which case income has to naturally take a drop, unless of course you've already built this business and it's running on autopilot essentially. But then what you still find is, regardless of where you sit on that spectrum, I just want to work as hard as I can and earn as much money as I can, or on the other side, as I just want to have as much fun as I can, or you're somewhere in the middle where I need a little bit of everything. I need a little bit of friendship, I need a little bit of, if you think about the wheel of life, career, family, health, interests, hobbies, and all of that. But what you still find, even within that people set goals. They say, I want to be world champion, I want to be, a Formula One driver, I want to be a professional footballer. And they have now tied that happiness to that goal. Yeah. And what you find is that they then get that goal and they still feel unhappy. And then it's the whole hedonic treadmill, isn't it? That, the next one, the next one, the next one. So where does that come from? Because is there not a case that, okay, I can totally understand that you want to set a goal because you believe that your life's going to be better at that point, but then you get there and it's still not. And there's sort of, it's a never ending, it's like running on a treadmill expecting to get to the finish line. You're never going to get there. So where does that come from? Why is it that we have that? And is that, again, a psychological thing that we've created ourselves to generate more success, never be happy, never be satisfied, as they say? Or is there something a little bit deeper that maybe you don't feel that you deserve happiness?
Yes, it's such an existential question, right? Yes, and that could be, the origins of that would change depending on the person. That even though we are very similar, we all have differences, and of course there is that origin where we might have had that repetition, those thoughts or those verbal repetition that of saying, well, if you don't do well at school, then you're not gonna get anywhere, or if you don't do what I tell you or how I tell you because I know better, then you're not gonna be. If you don't have that standard, then you're not gonna be good enough. So those beliefs get entrenched, and being not good enough means, okay, well, I keep trying, and that critical part perhaps is always playing. But yes, you did get to have that degree or to get that job, but you're not. But look at all these people; they are the best at the jobs you're not. So that critical side will always be. Then by nature, we also have that sort of, we do one more, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and we've done many things in this world, but wonderful, wonderful stuff over the years and the centuries, and the things that have accumulated just because we want more. First there is the light and the bulb, and now energy, and now we carry on with more and more, and that has, again, is a balance that can be exhausting. So I've got where I wanted to get 10 years ago, but now I want to get somewhere else that is going to take me another 10 years. And so being able to have a moment to really have a moment of gratitude for what you've done,
Yeah, to
to
experience and appreciate
appreciate.
the moment.
Yes, to appreciate what was there. And yes, maybe the journey will take me there, and that's fine. We go there and we try, and we enjoy the moment. We are in the present. We grounded in the here, because ultimately what we did in the past and what we will do in the future is irrelevant to every moment that we live, because the future, it will be always the future. And when it's here, it's no longer the future, it's the present. And the past is something that we can learn from, but it's already gone. So regretting is not going to, we can spend a lot of time regretting what we done, what we said, how we said it. And that is a way of not being in the present, but being somewhere else. So being able to do as much or as little as you want rather than as you need, because you cannot. But I cannot stop doing. Who would I be? Identity, right? Who would I be if I stop doing? If I stop being better? If I don't go to the next level, to the next step?
Do you think there's any sort of healthy part of that? Do you think it's maybe actually, if I think about it this way, is it that we have pedestalized our future in respect of, oh my God, if this happens, if I start this podcast, if I write this book, if I become this psychologist, if I, start this business, you sort of visualize and imagine how amazing that experience would be.
Yeah.
And then when you get there, you realize not much has changed.
No.
Not much has changed. And I think from my perspective, I think from my experiences in life and reading and things, that's sort of how I'm thinking about it just now. Is that maybe it's that we've elevated that status to, if I get that, I'm going to feel like Superman or whatever. And actually, maybe you don't, because I remember here's actually quite a close to home in some respects example. Judo world champion from England, his name was Craig Fallon. Unfortunately, he killed himself. He won the world championship, best judo player in the world for his age group, or weight group rather, and he killed himself. And the question I ask is it that maybe he's worked his whole life for this thing and nothing really changed, and maybe that is has caused some issue with. And look, I'm not here to give suicide advice, so for anyone listening, I'm not here for that. But is there maybe a thing that he's tied his happiness to that event? It's not quite what he's thought it was, in which case he's like, well, what was the point? I've just wasted 15 years and I've got no other future goals now, because my whole life was on this one goal. I've now passed that goal, I've achieved it, nothing's changed. I'm sort of stuck in limbo here with no future direction. Do you think there's anything in that, in some respect, that as a human being we always need a purpose and a direction to aim? And actually, if we have such a big overarching purpose that we achieve, maybe there's a case of lethargy and, as I said, limbo that you're stuck in.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Yes, there is a lot about expectations, and one key word that you said, thoughts, is what we thought that will make us happy. So that leads to expectations, and if we don't meet the expectations, what happens then? So if but in the contrast, if we set the bar low and we meet the expectation, and we still have room to maneuver, that perhaps takes us to a much more interesting space emotionally and mentally. But it is interesting because that identity is that identifying ourselves with those particular thoughts so strongly that that if the situation that we envision doesn't really come to be exactly how we envisioned it, it becomes very upsetting. And again, if there is a critical part in all of this that says, yes, but you got there, but what? There will be many other things that this person may have been going through in their minds that perhaps no one else knew, and that is most important. I think the thoughts is something that you said. So we thought, and therefore we didn't get there. So thinking that the more that we achieve, the more we do, the better we'll be. It is not something that tends to be always satisfying. It can be good. Yes, we need a purpose. Like, again, something very important you touched on. We as humans, we do need a purpose. Life without purpose, but what is purpose? Purpose is based on values. We tend to identify nowadays purpose with the job that we do. But again, that is perhaps partly based on in history, right? The traits, well, if back in the day, if my mother or my father did this is what I am part of, and they were proud of being part of that particular trait. Now a job is a different kettle of fish. Why do we do the work that we do? Do we do it because if this is what we've always wanted to do, or is it because it's what our attachment figures, those that were there, not pushed us, but kind of guided us to do? And was that because of our own likes and dislikes and needs, or was it more because they thought it was the best for us, which sometimes is really good, because sports and other types of endeavors, they, like, for instance, a Formula One, we hear many Formula One drivers, they start before they have the ability to really decide for themselves. Before they develop, before the cognitive abilities are developed, they are guided towards that in order to become really good earlier on and be able to follow the path early on, because the lifespan of a Formula One driver may be a bit shorter than that of a CEO of a business or administrative company. So is it really what we want? Even though we might say to ourselves and to everyone else, what I want to be is the first one at this, Have we really thought about it? No, no, have you really reflected on really what is it that we want about this? Is it the success? Is it the recognition? Is it because we love that particular sport, the movements, and how it helps others? So that sometimes is not there, that kind of reflection, because we've started so earlier on that it kind of is embedded, it's almost automatic. Of course, I like this. I've been doing it all my life.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there is a difference between sort of unconditional sort of happiness and conditional happiness. And as you said, it's a case of conditional happiness that we
Yeah.
put conditions on things. But in some ways, it's healthier than just unconditional happiness, because sometimes if you're just like, well, do you know what, I'm going to be happy with myself regardless of how bad my life is. I could be taking drugs every day, drinking every day, you know, doing nothing, sleeping all day. And actually, sometimes maybe the conditions that we put on is to have a net benefit later on in our lives. Because people say, look, don't just, work for happiness, because if you work for happiness, you're never going to have anything. But in some ways, we always are. We're looking at future happiness, because yes, we don't want to do this exam because it's horrible. We don't want to go to the gym because it's painful. But we're doing it for future benefit, future happiness, that you're going to maybe earn more or look better, or have a better relationship, etc., etc., etc. So maybe there is something in that. But then it brings you to the question is, the question rather, that is there a difference between what we want and what we think we want? Because I tend to see that a lot. Is that people say, oh yeah, well, I really want to be this, doctor, or I really want to become this accountant, or whatever it may be. But the way they say it, I just know they maybe deep down they don't really want that. There's a Stoic quote or something that says, and I'm probably bastardizing this somehow, but it's along the lines of, how can you ever expect what you want to happen if you don't even tell the truth to the gods? In some respects, if you're praying to ask for something, but that's not what, and you really want something else, how can you lie about it and expect life to go as you want it to? And I find that quite interesting, that I think that most people actually do have two lives. The one that they think is the right way, and the one they really want. Maybe it's the heart versus the head, possibly.
Maybe. Yes, yes, yeah. Well, these are the two main sources of information that we have, no matter how we're going to put it. We have cognitions and we have emotions. And that's the two ways, that the two sources of how we understand the world. And and of course, emotions can be uncomfortable, right? You were talking about pain earlier, and we don't want pain. We kind of, if we are in pain, we take a tablet so it disappears. Or if we are in emotional pain, we may perhaps run a marathon or be very busy so we don't have to have a moment where our mind said, "Oh well, you remember we are in pain. Oh no, let's just avoid that." So the pain is really important. So and how we learn emotionally, perhaps what is the pain? I mean, when we feel that isolation or not being good enough, those core beliefs that some of us, well, most of us have some to some degree, right? So what do I have to do to be better? Well, I need to become the first whatever, the first sportsman, the first prime minister, the first whatever that may be. What is the number one that we need to achieve? So, and how not to be in pain. You said about an exam is uncomfortable, but that is the uncomfortableness is it should be okay. It's one of the 35,000 mental states that we have: uncomfortable, pain, joy, happiness, and all sorts of other. So we kind of reduce in limiting our lives to happy. If I'm not happy, then I have to do something, because if I don't do something, then I cannot be happy. So it becomes that condition. So to be happy, I have to be happy, and that's why I would go as far as saying perhaps irrational, but that is too much. It's that we strive to be in one state all of the time, when it's okay. And much of the growth, of the personal growth that happens at times where we're not really that happy. Is when we have to reflect on, okay, so what's happening right now? Why am I uncomfortable? And if we keep avoiding that, that growth might never happen.
100%, and I think that's a massive thing, is that people think, well, why can't life just be super easy? Why don't we just everyone gets given a house and a car and everything like that, and life just be super easy, always happy? But unfortunately, as you said, no one develops like that. The best people in the world have had and gone through challenges and obstacles that have got them there. They didn't become the world champion boxer by just staring at a TV screen. They spoke to coaches, they did physical exercise, they got punched in the face thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And all of those little dents, psychologically and physically, of course, have created this person. And unfortunately, most people don't want to go through that.
No, no, most people don't want to go through that. And again, yes, we pain averse, right? Pain with we are conditioned not to like, not to enjoy pain, but not to, the pain is there to tell us that something is wrong. So we need to look into that. If we can stay a little bit more in the pain, in sort of be in the emotion, whatever that might be, we can get to understand it and get what it means. Like, for instance, I don't know, many of us feel giving a public talk is an anxiety-provoking situation. What is anxiety but a response to fear? So, but anxiety is an ancient type of response. It's the limbic system. And it's there for survival. The limbic system is hijacking our abilities to think, which is what we need in a situation like, for instance, giving a talk, right? And so if our limbic system gets hijacked by more primary emotions, then we struggle to do to do anything else, because, as you probably know, that the cortex will be cut off, because what the limbic system is saying is, okay, so the anxiety levels, the breathing has changed, so this means that we are in danger. It doesn't know that it's a talk rather than, I don't know, a tsunami, something else. It just understands that this is a survival moment. And so our our capabilities would be, our quintessential capabilities would be to understand that this is an ancient response, and as long as there is no danger at the moment, we can put it to rest, rested by breathing, but very easy, in very easy ways. Basically, the language of the limbic system is very basic. And so then our capabilities to think, to use our neocortex, come into light, and then we can focus on what is the task, the complex task that needs thinking, like, for instance, is giving a talk or doing an exam. Or, I mean, if we're incredibly anxious whilst we're doing the exam, it's very difficult to actually, no matter how well you know, it's very difficult to get your words out, just exactly for that reason.
But do you think there's a difference, though? So, yes, okay, let's say we now understand pain and difficulty. This exam's going to give you the qualification, assuming you get the right grade to go to university, or, go through this particular training regime and get this job and start this business, whatever it may be. Do you think there's a difference between that and what I would call sort of a soul-destroying pain, where the certain pain we understand is going to be of net benefit, but then there are people who are doing jobs or certain things within their life, they know it's destroying their soul, and I can't explain that. I feel there's a difference within me, that certain things I do, I'm like, okay, this is pain, I know it's a good pain, versus this is literally like someone's ripping out my soul, and it's terrible, it's horrible.
Yes, no, completely. That obviously, yeah, there are very different kinds of pains, and that kind of pain is soul destroying, where basically, and if, especially in your case, if you are able to really realize the differences, is this is a good kind of pain, right, versus the other then again, it's important to stop, give ourselves the time that we need. If is this a kind of pain that I I'm putting myself through, or is it something that I'm living in um, uh, because of the situation that I am in? Of course, no, definitely. And avoidance is there for a reason. Of course, we can no function if we constantly in pain, especially excruciating pain, as you mentioned. We need to have within us a way of protecting our organism to be able to carry on functioning. Otherwise, we'll be rendered not functional. And then obviously we just going into much more of a clinical sort of realms where, okay, we now need help in order to get ourselves out of that pain. And we're talking pain in a very loose ways, and a pain is a complex matter, and a physical, when we just think about physically, when we think about emotional pain, and we're talking about perhaps past trauma, we're talking about depression, or we're talking about anxiety, to just name the more common spaces of pain, then you would need, then the key, I suppose, most clearly would be to be able to know when to ask for help, and to ask for help when we've gone to a space where I think, okay, my capabilities here are not helping me. I've tried various things, or tried to reflect, or I've tried to meditation, or I've tried to breathe, and nothing really helps. I cannot sleep at night because I'm constantly ruminating. Tomorrow I have to get up and go into this work where I really cannot stand anyone. So there are lots of ways in which experiencing that pain, and maybe at that point we think, okay, I'm just in this circle, in this catch-22, and who can I recruit in my life to help me a little bit?
Do you think that's essentially burnout? That situation where you feel that, do you know what? I don't even want to get out of bed. I just feel lethargic, no energy. There's no purpose driving me other than the fact that well, there is no purpose, because the purpose that is there, it's not aligned with what you really want. And I know, you could say, man's search for meaning, Viktor Frankl, he finds purpose in, the death camps essentially. And, you could find purpose in anything, but the purpose needs to be sort of bigger than yourself in some respects. But if whatever you're doing, as you said, if you can't even get up in the morning, you're dreading going to work, you don't even like the people there and all those sorts of things, do you think that's where burnout comes from? Or do you think there's a sort of wider scope of burnout, and yeah, it affects probably more people than you think? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think at the moment burnout is affecting many of us, and there has been a distinct jump in terms of working burnout in generally, really, isn't it? In terms of since the pandemic times have really kind of we accelerated. Everything needs to happen now. You might remember when replying to an email, it was something that you did whenever it was a good time. Now, if you don't reply to an email within 24 hours, you know that's it, that you lost it, that the other person is gonna feel well, she's not there, they not there. So kind of everything needs to be now. Our attention powers have also decreased over the last 20 years, and that statistically is recently been um, one of these studies that have come up saying that, well, our attentional power has decreased from about an average of 90 seconds to about 60 seconds. So really is slowly. So we want that's attention, and we also want immediate gratification. So if I send an email to someone, I want them to reply straight away. So yes, life as is at a frantic pace. Now, where is our agency in that? So if tomorrow you're going to go to work to 1,000 emails and 300 instructions from your manager or whatever, it kind of it's difficult to live up to that every day, every working day.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because it's a paradox. Because I want my emails responded to today, like you said, but I don't want to just be stressed to say, look, you have to send back emails. It's like we want to be able to go to the shops on weekends and evenings, but we don't want to work evenings and weekends. So it's the whole paradox. We want one thing, but unfortunately we don't always want to be on the other side. But again, that comes back to human empathy and understanding that, you know, it works both ways. In order for you to want something, someone has to do something, that sacrifice. And maybe that's a dialogue that people need to have with themselves as well. Okay, you want to be, you know, the world famous author or whatever. You need to then read and write books, but I don't want to do that. But then how do you ever expect that dichotomy of how do you ever expect to get here without doing the necessary steps in order to get there? I want to stand on top of the mountain and see the view, but I don't want to hike 4,000 meters. And let's assume there's no gondola or anything like that. But I think that's a real issue with today as well, which is maybe, again, possibly the burnout or
Yeah.
falling into that category where the people's goals and what they're willing to do are they're so far apart that then people get into that space of depression or whatever it may be because their actions aren't aligning with what they actually want in future.
Yes, it's too hard. And you're going back to something that yes, you said earlier, isn't it? Is that that wanting is it what I want the same as what I need? And those again, we're going back to attachment, understanding. So in terms of attachment, there are kind of four pillars, right? One is safety, so we need to be saved. The other one is proximity, the closeness is very important. We know it creates all sorts of hormones, oxytocin, etc. The other one is comfort. Comfort is also very, very important, and that's where we live mostly at the moment. And also it is important in this in attachment predictability. So how predictable it is that I send an email and I get a response back, or that I do certain amount of work and or I say, or I give in relationships, if I'm a nice person and I care for the other person, then I'm going to receive that back. But of course, that there is a huge range of possibilities within that in terms of attachment. So comfort is really where we live, and comfort. So I want this because I'm a bit more comfortable. But is it really what you need? Or what you were saying earlier, something along the lines of, is what I think I want the same as what I want? But I think we need to define and make the clear difference between what I want and what I actually need. I might want a cup of coffee, but at 8 at night, a cup of coffee may just keep me awake all night.
I don't have that problem actually. Like I can drink coffee fairly late and it doesn't affect my ability to sleep, weirdly. Some people are like, oh, you're having a coffee at 6 o'clock? And I'm like, well,
It works for
I don't.
you.
Yeah, I don't have. I don't. I mean, I don't really that often, but I usually have like last one about 3 or something maybe. But it doesn't affect me like that. I just don't really feel like having a coffee at that point. It's it's more of a morning drink, a warm drink. Towards the evening, I like a colder drink, like a beer, for example.
Right, right, right,
So
right.
so yeah, they have different uses, I suppose. But
Yeah,
just
but for instance, having a beer at night, I mean, again, we know what it does to our brain. It's something that we might want, but if tomorrow we have to perform, i.e., we have to have that marathon, it will affect our performance. So it is kind of what I want, what I need, and with what I know of my body. Like you said, I've tried it before. Caffeine doesn't really affect me at night. So you know that of you. So it's the environment, it's the product, and it's what you know of you. So there is a combination. It's not just one thing, i.e., coffee at night is it won't let you sleep. That is not 100%. It's not a fact. It doesn't happen.
just on the marathon thing, because that's opened up another thought in my head, whether it's
Yeah.
off topic or not. doesn't matter. I suppose it probably is still on topic, but oh well. Is there a case that, okay, let's use your example of drinking the night before a marathon or a big speech or whatever. Actually, I suppose it is related. Coming back to the attachment and self-identity, is it that people know it's wrong, but they do it anyway because actually they are self-sabotaging, they have such a low self-esteem that they feel that, one, I don't really deserve this nice thing, so I'm just going to drink anyway, and two, if I drink, I can blame it on the fact that I didn't perform because I drank. It takes away that accountability and agency that you mentioned earlier. Do you think there is merit in that?
Yeah, I think that there is certainly merit in that. Of course, yes, and then we go back to earlier patterns of attachment, right? In terms of, well, if I believe I'm not good enough, there will be a part of me, as a saboteur, perhaps that would we make sure that the frame, my psychological understanding or my understanding of the world is met. So if I'm not good enough, I'm not gonna finish that marathon. So I might as well try something, right? These things don't happen cognitively. It's not like you sit at night thinking, okay, I'm gonna have the beer, so tomorrow I won't do well in the marathon. That's not it. It's much more automatic. It happens below the awareness, below the consciousness level, if you like, usually. So yes, I think there is some merit on that. Then again, uh, particularly alcohol, it depends on your relationship with alcohol, of course, because alcohol we know is a very powerful um, substance, and it creates dependencies that are very difficult to break. So it depends on the relationship we have with the substance in itself as well. So if let's say in a situation where I'm running a marathon because I want to stop drinking because I'm drinking too regularly, and if I train, so there is a whole sort of array. But certainly, what you say is it has a merit. What you said about the saboteur within is something that we can do very easily, right?
So how do we go about changing that? Let's say, we have got a negative self-image because of maybe our attachments in the past or current attachments, which affects our self-image. It's been said that people who stay alone for days and weeks, it's actually worse than smoking 40 cigarettes a day for your health. So let's say that is the case, and you then self-sabotage and go down this negative spiral because, as we know, direction and trajectory matters, whether it's up or down. How do we change that? How do we go from self-sabotaging and going the wrong way to going the right way? Is it just a case of self-talk and doing these habits and changing our daily to-do list and our actions that would affect that, or is there something a lot deeper, sort of psychologically, for want of a better word, that we need to change at the fundamental source level? So instead of painting the wall over and over again, it's or let's use a car for example. A car's rusting, okay, you can quickly sand it down and paint it. That'll be okay for 6 months, and then it will come back again, and you need to sand it down and paint it, and then it might be 5 months, and then it might be 4 months, and then it might be 3 months, and it will come a point where it keeps banging on the door to say, look, I am rusted, and actually you need to change the panel. Is there something a lot deeper, do you think, that we need to go back into the mainframe, the maintenance side of the brain, and actually change that fundamental belief system? So for example, some people have limiting beliefs that say, oh, you have to be a crook to be rich. All the rich people are all crooks. And because you believe that, you think, I'm not a crook, therefore I can't be rich. And that's how you sort of portray your beliefs that then dictate your actions, rather. Do you think there is truth in that?
Of course, yes, there is certainly that momentarily. Yeah, I have people come and saying, "Well, I've had therapy for a many occasions, um, and still have the same problem, for instance, and that is that rusty part of the car, right? Where yes, it works for a little while, but when therapy finishes, the benefits end. It has that because. But not because there are various, obviously, there is not just a one because, but the fact that if there is an underlying belief, as you were saying, that belief is not just as easy as saying, oh, okay, I believe that I'm not good enough, right? And that's it. Then now, if I believe that I'm good enough, then things would change. So this is almost like is an underlying is the carpet under everything where you see it.
Is it like an iceberg? You know, like 90% is under the water and
Yeah,
10% above.
that is a little bit less conscious, exactly, and so you cannot really get through every decision. Is a process, and that which is different to a task, isn't it? A process takes time. Awareness needs a space to be in it, to be reflected. So going back to the simple rules, just if you have identified, you become aware. If someone becomes aware that, okay, there is some pattern here, and it could be that yes, there is a sort of a saboteur here, and so exploring what the origin of that is. Uh, can be very helpful, and then we go. Usually, these get created very early in life, right? Going back to attachment. They are these old scripts. They need to be explored, re-explored, understood with the capabilities that we have as adults. They say that as a child you were told many times, yes, well, you don't, whatever you did, it wasn't good enough. You didn't do it right. You didn't get enough marks. You didn't do it right, and you start believing that most of the things that you do, they're not right. So understanding that this is not a belief that comes from your own experience, that comes from someone else's experience, it takes time.
So if that is the case, then what are some practical steps people can try and implement that can help change that wiring? You know, obviously, ideally you'd speak to a professional, of course, but something that they could do, even a small change that they could do in their own life to sort of, you know, whether it is a self-sabotage, whether they feel worthless, whether it's, you know, they're going through a bad spell, something bad has happened to them. How do they go about thinking different or changing that sort of thought pattern that seems to be on loop?
If you think about this, as you were saying, is on loop, is automatic. So what is very beneficial is to take a step back. And of course, again, that has pluses and minuses. The benefits is that, okay, so to realize when a thought comes, when a feeling about that thought comes, and the action that we're going to take, i.e., well, I'm never gonna get this, so I might as well not even try. So to stop and reflect and basically slow down. If we give ourselves just a little bit of time, but of course we don't. The minuses are, well, I don't have, most people don't have time today to do any thinking or any reflections about themselves. But it's as simple as that. If you put aside, yes, even 10 minutes to start with, even 5 if you've never done it before, just sit down and just notice, okay, what is it that I've done today? What are the decisions? What is this pattern that keeps appearing? Something that you might have noticed. What is it? What triggered that? What event triggered that? That is a start. So, and how did I feel? How did I felt in my body? And what thoughts were happening there? What could be an alternative? So that is where, for instance, a cognitive approach can be helpful in that it kind of slows us down. And then the reflection is, okay, so it's being able, there is usually a pattern. And so it takes time in any identification of patterns. It takes time, doesn't it, to look at, to see where that pattern is, when does it appear, what are the triggers of them, and noticing that and being aware of that can lead you to the next stage, which is acknowledgement. So okay, now I am aware that every time that I am in a relationship, I become very anxious, and I think that the other person is not gonna, for instance, is not gonna like me, and if they like me, I'm wondering why they like me, because so if you start identifying that, then you can perhaps start doing things slightly different. So if after three relationships and you always do the same, then say, okay, let's try something different. Let's just for a moment imagine that actually all of this is just in my mind, and actually in the relationship nothing is happening. The other person is liking me for who I am or how I am. So am I uh, I might not take that step further, or do what I usually do, or leave that thought to rest, trying to say, well, that is a thought that is there. Minds have all sort of wonderful and not so wonderful thoughts. They can do all sorts of things. Identifying ourselves with that thought is what, without thinking about it, because it's what we usually do, is what makes it a bit difficult to shift, to have a different pattern occurring. So being aware of these thoughts, being thoughts and not something that I need to identify with, is important. And to do that, we need time, we need space, we need to hear, see, smell, whatever you like, the thought, and stop at that point rather than before it gets to the action time, where it can happen in milliseconds. So you really need to slow down a little. So if something is important, if something that is important is time, give ourselves the time. And if we feel that there is a pattern, then slow it down, see it in writing. The brain benefits from seeing things in writing and from hearing ourselves verbalizing some of those thoughts. So it
100%.
start making sense.
100%. And I think the I mean, look, not everyone has the level of introspection to be able to analyze themselves from a different angle. It's like the whole Solomon's paradox, isn't it? Where King Solomon was the best at giving advice. He was the guy to go to give advice, but his own life wasn't even that great because it was easy for him to see, the issues rather than himself. And I think that's the problem. Because if you have your own confirmation bias and cognitive bias and all these sorts of things, and you are analysing your own perspective, you're analysing it with the perspective that got you into that position in the first place a lot of the time. So this is why it's good to speak to psychologists, counsellors, therapists, coaches, all that sort of thing, whereby they are a mirror to you, and they are a mirror that can see things that you probably can't see. And I think that's, by all means, start doing yourself. Try and realise, how do I feel in this situation? Why do I think like this in this situation? But it's always better to have someone else look at it for you, because you're the fly in the wall. All you can see is, even if you can try and visualise the fact that you're standing on a wall, someone else can see the whole picture. And I think that's really important. Just leading on to an interesting thought. What about dreams then? What about dreams and their importance? Because obviously dreams could either be just nothingness, in terms of your mind just comes up with random stuff, or that it has an inherent meaning. It's like Carl Jung, I think it was, called it synchronicities, didn't he? Whereby, you might have dreams about stuff and then they happen. Or, we've all had it where we think of someone and 2 minutes later they call us. Do you think there's anything to that at all? And I know this probably, don't know if it's part of psychology in some respects, but I think it's interesting because we're talking about sort of how the mind operates and how we think of things. Do you think there is something in that?
Yes, yeah, there is something. Obviously, it is not always there. We're supposed to dream every night. Some of us don't remember, others do, and and uh, and dreams tend to be perhaps more intensive, or intense even when we are going through stressful times, or we cannot sleep, or we go to bed thinking about something that is worrying us, and we wake up, we go to sleep, and then we wake up in the middle of the morning, of the night, and we've had a dream about something that could be related to that. Of course, every dream has its own owner, and is related to life. But certainly there could be there is that synchronicity that can relate to how you are at the present. And going back to the iceberg, um, during our dreams, we are under that iceberg, if you like. No, we're not seeing the 10%. We are in the 90% of things that perhaps we're not ready yet to see, in our conscious awareness, in our awakened life. And so they may happen in our dreams, as sometimes also happens with a somatic presentation of problems, isn't it? Of whatever the mind can not process, the body takes, the body reflects. So yes, if we cannot in the awareness resolve whatever it is that we're trying to resolve, it can come out in different ways, and dreams may be one of them.
So, what's one question we should be asking ourselves if we think about, as a general, generic basis, a question that maybe. So, I'm a big believer in questions, in that to get answers, we have to ask the right questions. I mean, it's like a conversation. For me to understand more about identity and attachment, I have to ask questions in order for you to relay that information back. And we're very much the same. And it's, whilst what psychologists and counsellors and coaches do is they don't say, do this. They ask questions to allow things to unfold. So what's a key question we should be asking ourselves that will help to spark some thoughts that might change something for us?
I think a very good question would be something along the lines of, um, and you can do this at any point. It's like, okay, how is my mind right now? What is what is the what is the essence of my mind right now? How is my mind right now? It's like, if you see a friend say, how are you right now? It's sort of the same thing. So where is the state of my mind right now? How is it rested? Is it not rested? Is it worried? So just noticing that can bring you back to the present. You might have not noticed that you were worrying whilst you were doing many other things, preparing for work, or getting ready for whatever, or doing the tasks at work, and having a moment to stop, giving yourself the time. So where are we now? How does it feel
I like it.
inside?
So you're saying go from being the person to the observer. It's like
Yeah,
metacognition, isn't it? Whereby instead of being involved in the process, like a rat in a cage,
yeah,
you step back and try and become the observer of the mind thinking, which I think is a real powerful way to think about it. And like you said, you ask someone, "How are you doing today?" It's like what you said before we came on air. Have you had
yeah,
a good day? How's your day been?
yeah,
And yeah, I like that. It's what we can ask ourselves in the same respect. Are we being aggressive? Are we being are we agitated? Are we stressed? Are we scatterbrain?
yeah.
Are we calm? Are we stoic? And I think that's a really, really good question to ask.
And that can lead you to all sorts of, oh, okay, so I'm feeling a bit anxious today, or my mind is busy. It's a kind of busyness, that busy bee. Then, well, generally, I wouldn't have said before I asked how my mind was. I wouldn't have said that it was that way, but actually interesting. Oh, okay. So, and then act perhaps accordingly after that question is asked. Ask accordingly, act accordingly, right? So if mine is a little bit scattered at the moment, perhaps it's like um, a sandstorm. So we wait, we help the sun to come down. We kind of perhaps take a few deep breaths, or do something, or do nothing, just be in it. and then give ourselves more time. Again, during the day, we might be very anxious. We might notice our mind, oh, it's like it's going from one thought to other, another, and another, and another. So okay, maybe, oh, it's tired. Maybe I need to give myself a little bit less things to do today.
I love talking about these sorts of things, how the mind works, how, from a sort of deterministic perspective, how things that happened to you 20 years ago are actually shaping who you are right now. And I find that really interesting that the things that happen today are going to affect how you're going to behave in 20 years possibly, because your mind is absorbing everything that's going on, this conversation, what you're doing if you're driving or whatever. And I find that fascinating from a development perspective.
Yes, yes. What can I say? Me too. And that is um, it's so interesting, isn't it? That we constantly, interestingly, right? We talked earlier about wanting to go further, but we're constantly growing and changing without us realizing it every moment, even though 70 to 85% of our thoughts, sometimes depending on the source that you go to, are always the same every day, day after day. There are slight changes. Some are intentional and some are not. And that is going to lead us to growth. Yes. Sometimes we find it difficult that, right? And sometimes it's difficult um, to uh, to allow growth is change, and we're generally a little bit skeptical about change, especially if it's not a chosen change. And as a result, sometimes that tends to happen without us having a choice because it's due. That can
Love
be a
it.
bit.
Humans don't like change, but change is necessary, and it's shown through nature. Change happens all the time, and as humans, we want to avoid change, but change can be the very thing that we need. Because if you didn't change, you'd still be being breastfed by your mum, living in nappies.
For instance, yeah, and that whether we try or not change, it is never going to happen, right? It's gonna run its course. Cells are going to change. We're going to shed cells every so often, fully, and again and again. So yes, yeah, definitely, change is necessary. Readiness for intentional change is different, and if we could see that, that will probably lead us to follow the river rather than trying to go against the current in many situations, like relationships ending or not working, or trying too hard to stay here when actually it's time to move.
100%, and I think that's one of the issues with society today is that it's seen that the harder you seem to be working, the more grinding you're doing, the more chance of success, which is not always the case. It's the whole Wu Wei thing from Alan Watts. As you said, go with the flow of the river, tack if required, and go with the flow of life.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't matter whether it might feel it doesn't again, that can lead to a misunderstanding, isn't it? Oh, if I go with the flow of life, what are you saying, that if I go with the flow of life, then I won't feel the pain going back to. Yeah, well, that is not the same. Maybe you have to go through the pain in order to get to the other side of the river, and that is fine. Not being fearful, making decisions based on fear, that is a huge problem. I don't want to change because of fear. I know this, I don't know that. And that is very much limbic system, very much survival. Is not reality. Well, in reality, in terms of thriving, if we are in a space as we are at the moment where we're safe enough, then exploring and changing, it doesn't mean that we always get it right. Oh well, every time in my work sometimes, and sometimes might not work, but intentional change will lead certainly much more into into that flow, feeling that you are at the right time, in the right place, feeling that this is your moment.
Love it. So, if people can or want to reach out to you, where can they do so, Marta?
Yeah. Well, our website is Harmonia Psychology Solutions. That is a place. My email again is info@harmoniasolutions.co.uk. We have an Instagram and a LinkedIn page that more than welcome to visit, and I'll be on the other side if you need something.
Well, we'll put it all on the show notes and stuff anyway, so people will be
Okay.
able to click the links and stuff. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Marta. It's been awesome. As I said, love speaking about these sorts of things. The
It's been
hour,
lovely.
hour and a bit's flown by, so
My goodness. Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really, yeah, I love this, the way that you've done this very organic, just happening as a conversation flow. So just going with the flow.
well, that's perfect way to end. So thanks again.
You're very welcome. Take care, Jivan.